This is a spaceship, a virtual spaceship, for traveling in time, fueled up and ready to go. Let's blast off on a journey to the Time Warp Tavern, a friendly pub with a difference. Join Russell and Lawrence there as they revisit their experiences of life as two young boys growing up in the 1960s.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff.
What will they be talking about today?
And literally in the next street,
Yeah.
and a nice big pine cabinet. So we just, went around the corner and picked it up. Back in the 60s, you couldn't imagine. So things have changed.
Changed beyond all recognition, haven't they? And
Yeah.
the way people behave, the things they say, the things they do, and how they look, it's all so different to when we were growing up, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was thinking about this the other day, actually. I mean, what you might call normal everyday life.
It's virtually unrecognisable from how it was, say, 50 or 60 years ago.
Yes.
And eventually, are people going to remember how things actually were back then? The everyday things.
I'll tell you something that occurred to me the other day. There's a site on Facebook which is dedicated to the area of Uxbridge and Ruislip and people's memories from when they were growing up. And people put old photographs on and they talk about places they went to and people they knew. Very interesting.
Oh, yeah.
And what's most interesting is when you look at the photographs, there's loads of really old stuff there. Everything up to, let's say, the late 1940s, early 1950s. Everyone in the picture is wearing a hat of some sort.
Yes.
Men, women and children as well. Boys wearing caps, even little girls wearing a bonnet of some sort. So a little bit of sort of unspoken history when you look at them.
It's a record of the way life looked back then. And it's something that, modern day social historians don't always get right because they don't have personal memory of it. I mean, for instance, there was a sort of look that people had. Even as far forward as the 1970s, I can remember people still looked like that to some degree.
Yeah.
It's like the swinging 60s still hadn't completely transformed everything by that stage,
But yes, very much.
I mean, those photos tell a story of how things were.
As much as, the look of everything, things like habits, routines and traditions of everyday life in the past. Life has changed so much since then. The memory of them is almost disappearing.
I was reading an article online, actually. This was quite interesting. It's people's feedback about things which they regret slipping from tradition. And one of the things was people taking afternoon tea.
Well, actually, do you know what? About a year or so ago, we went up to Harrogate and there's a place there, I can't remember the name of it. And it's exactly that. It's the waitresses in the lacy outfits. And you go in there in the afternoon or lunchtime and have a pot of tea and a cake or a fondant fancy.
And they're sort of selling it as a retro thing.
Yeah, and it's actually very nice. But it's a bit of a throwback, a sort of a nutritional version of the good old days, I suppose.
Well, it was something that my parents did when they were young. Do you remember Lions Corner houses?
Oh, yes.
They were just sort of going out when we were growing up. Places people went for afternoon tea, and my parents went when they first knew each other. And you'd sit down and you'd have like cakes on tiered stands they bring round, bread and butter neatly positioned on plates, like that. So that was one of the things people sort of like regret the loss of.
Yeah.
Another one was people going to bingo.
Oh.
Not that it was something that my parents would have done anyway, but I knew people that did it.
I don't think my parents played bingo, but we would play bingo at home.
Yeah, that's
we had
right.
Sort of bingo.
And you take it in turns to be the bingo caller.
Oh, yeah.
Bizarrely, one of the other things that people regret the passing of,
This is very odd, the Pope's Easter message. Do you remember that?
I do remember it.
Do they still televise it?
I think he does get out on the balcony, doesn't he?
Yeah, it was Sunday morning, and instead of the normal church services,
you would get that, and it would be mixed in between all the adult education programmes.
That's right.
It was the height of boredom because it was the Pope talking in Italian.
A bit like watching BBC Cymru.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
I mean, back in those days, I can't think of anyone we knew, friends or family, that was actually foreign.
No.
There was a lady who ran the chemist shop. I think her family's French, but you just didn't see people from other countries, did you?
The world in those days was your neighbourhood, wasn't it? And everything else was just sort of out there somewhere. You just didn't know much about it.
We used to get a rag and bone man would come down our road, and I used to find him quite scary, actually.
Did you?
Because he'd be ringing a bell, and all I could make out was he would say, "Oh, wait, all right."
It was always in that tune as well, wasn't it? I remember it like that.
And what hell is he talking about?
Yeah, that's a foreign language in itself.
And there'd be like an old bedstead on there and some lead piping or something.
Yeah.
He's driving down the road talking in this language I don't understand. What does he actually want? Should I call the council? Get him expelled? I wonder what they call out now. 40-inch TV. Oh, here's one, mate. Oh, cheers. Chuck it on the back.
These days, if people want to get rid of something, they just leave it outside their front garden.
Yeah, they do, don't they?
Yeah.
And you see the stuff that people are chucking, and it's all like brand new.
Yeah. When my parents moved house and we got our first house on our own, we had to buy a suite of furniture for the first time. You know, a sofa and bedroom cabinets and stuff like that. It was all brand new and that, but it lasted for years after that. And if anything was, you know, looking a little bit shabby or something, my dad would fix it.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times during your period of growing up would your parents have bought a new suite of furniture or something like that?
Don't think it ever happened. We would have inherited stuff, but we had stuff that hung around for years.
Yeah, we did as well. That's something that's really changed, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the idea of buying a new settee or a new suite of furniture, that would be unheard of, really, wouldn't it? Oh, you darn your socks.
Yeah, darn your socks. Oh, yeah. I can see my mum sitting there, actually, like a winter evening or something, you know. TV would be on, she'd be sitting there darning socks while she was watching it, you know, something, you know.
Yeah.
It's like putting herself to use, something practical while she's watching the television.
There was a Jack D.
Oh, yeah,
He was doing a thing about when you'd be very young growing up.
Yeah.
And somewhere around about August, September, your grandma or auntie would come round. Right, what does Jack want for Christmas then? I'll knit him a nice jumper. Oh, God. And he said, I don't know what they use for that wool they use to knit jumpers. But it's like this real itchy, horrible, uncomfortable. So he imagined his auntie going down to the wool shop. So have you got that nice soft wool they have at Marks and Spencer's? No. Oh, right. Well, I'll have 2 rolls of that itchy flex that you
It's
normally...
like the sort of clothing equivalent of Izal, isn't it?
I remember one year I got a jumper, and it was like a red jumper, and then my auntie had obviously run out of that particular colour of wool, and then halfway down your chest, it suddenly goes to a slightly darker colour. That's no good, because what you really want is Action Man or a Pez dispenser.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Something you're familiar with from the TV.
Yeah, you didn't want something that was your mum's taste.
No.
In those days, though, the concept of like leisure time didn't really exist, did it?
No, it didn't.
With labour-saving devices, everything's so much easier now, and it means you've got more time to yourself. My mum didn't really think in terms of that. It's like, well, she was sitting there, she'll do something practical at the same time.
Yes, that's very true, that. Very strong work ethic.
If she had time off, she wouldn't know what to do with herself. She'd think, I'll just get on with something, you know.
Polish the doorstep. Yeah. Although there were periods of Sunday afternoon where my parents would just be sitting there sleeping on the settee.
Oh, yeah.
They wouldn't call that leisure time. It was just a period where...
That was the day of rest, though, wasn't it?
Payback.
Yeah, payback. But my mum was always looking for some sort of job to do.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah, maybe it's just sort of a hangover from World War II. You know, if you sit around doing nothing, you could be doing something to help the war effort, couldn't you?
Yeah.
You know,
yeah, that's right, yeah. I think life was more ritualised, wasn't it, when we were growing up?
Yeah.
Really strict routines, unspoken ones that people just sort of adhered to.
Yes,
you know,
very much so.
My mum would go around and she'd see my nan sort of in the mornings. They would have 11s, you know, which would be like a cup of tea and a biscuit and a gossip.
My mum and my Auntie Nora would sit together.
Auntie Nora.
And they could chat endlessly.
Oh, yeah.
About nothing.
Yeah.
Well, a bit like you and me. Really.
Yeah.
And I'd be sitting there as a 5-year-old, oh, God, can't we talk about the Beatles or Basil Brush or something?
Yeah, it was always serious grown-up stuff.
Yeah, and a bit of gossip about that family down at number 34.
And to sort of accompany that, they'd just go and make another cup of tea, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
You know, there's always another cup of tea and perhaps a biscuit.
Yeah. No, but I've got to get back. Okay, well, just one more then. Okay.
Yeah,
And the other thing that mums did then,
yeah.
which was terrible in front of your mates, if you had a bit of something on your face like
Oh,
that,
I know what
and
you're
then
going to say.
get a handkerchief out.
Yeah,
Come here,
yeah.
clean that. Oh, mum, it's so uncool, isn't it?
Yeah, and my mum, she used to do that outside the school gates as well sometimes. You just wanted to shrink into the ground, didn't you? You know, I don't know if mums can actually get away with doing that now, can they? But that's something else that's gone out, actually. It was always cloth handkerchiefs in those days, wasn't it?
Yes, yes.
Didn't really use tissues that much
No.
till later on.
And quite often the cloth handkerchief would have initials in the corner.
Yeah, yeah. My mum would wash them and iron them and fold them.
Yeah,
But when you think about it now, they can't be that hygienic, can they?
not at all.
You know, people blow their nose on it, put it back in their pocket.
Oh,
It's just a little part of life that's gone, isn't it? It's something which at one point it just suddenly vanished.
yeah.
So many bits of our life that have sort of changed like that. You know, it's just a little thing like that, cloth handkerchiefs.
Do you remember often people would have a room that they call the room for best?
Yeah,
But no one ever went in there unless an auntie or grandma was coming. And everything was best. So you had your best china, everything was neat, and you didn't even go in there unless there was some special occasion.
yeah. My grandparents, my dad's parents, I mean, they had a room like that because they had a sort of living room which is in the back next to the kitchen, and they had the TV in it and armchairs and stuff like that and a dining table. But they also had a parlour.
Parlour.
Originally, when they were younger, it was used like Sundays, you know, but it was like all the special stuff, the ornaments and everything. It used to have like nice fireplace tongs and that on a stand, you know, and they were all polished to shine.
Yeah.
And there was a clock which chimed in there. It had a little intricate little thing that revolved and that. And nobody saw this room, you know. It was just like there for Sundays. It was like a museum piece, you know. Smelt of mothballs.
Mothballs.
Yeah.
Or beeswax polish or something like that.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah.
Do they use mothballs these days?
Yeah, that seems to have gone out of fashion, isn't it? Moths eating your clothes.
Talking about grandparents, though, I was just thinking about visiting relatives or relatives visiting you, which was quite a big deal back then, wasn't it?
Yes. My grandparents came from Yorkshire. And I remember when I was very young going up to see them and we'd get on the train and you'd be going past field after field after field after field and trees and towns and it was like you were going to Mars.
Yeah.
It wasn't you were just going up the road.
Then at the other end, when it was time to go home, it was quite long drawn out, wasn't it?
There was always this big ceremony about people leaving, wasn't
There was.
there? Relatives would stay with you.
Yeah.
When they were leaving, it was like seeing someone off to Australia. It was like you're never going to see them.
It was like an extended goodbye, wasn't it? Yeah.
And you can't do it in one step.
No.
You start off chatting, and the first step, your granddad says, "Right, well, we better make a move."
That's right, yeah. And that would be said a few times, wouldn't it?
So then,
Yeah.
maybe 15 minutes later, they'd get up.
Slapping the legs like
Right.
that. Yeah, that's right, yeah.
So then you walk towards the door. You don't
Yeah.
actually touch the door.
No.
There's another 10 minutes there.
Yeah.
And then you get your hand on the hand of the door.
Yeah.
Then that's another 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And then you open the door, and then you all go outside.
Yeah.
And then just about to go, Grandma would come up to me with possibly 2 shillings.
Yeah.
And she'd put it in my hand like
Yeah.
that. Don't tell your mother.
That's very
She's
similar
saying-
to my experience, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't tell your mother, yeah.
Don't tell your mother.
And, slip it in and it would be like a half whisper.
That's for you. Yeah.
And your heart would beat a little bit. You
Kinda
think,
like-
oh.
And then if your
rich.
mum caught you, she'd say, "No, don't give him that."
Oh, it's all right. I haven't got any use for it. Let him have it. Let him enjoy himself. You know, that was always the thing. You always looked forward to relatives coming for that reason. I mean, we were very mercenary as kids, weren't we? You know.
Oh, of course.
But we could entertain ourselves quite cheaply if we had to.
Yeah.
That's something that's changed, isn't it?
I remember when we lived in the shop, if we'd had a tin of Pepsi Cola or Coca Cola.
Yeah.
Now, those tins were pretty robust in those days. So what we would do, remember the little triangular shaped opener?
Little
that you
opener
would-
things,
you-
yeah, mini openers, yeah.
So what we used to do, my
Yeah.
brother and I, we would go around the top of the tin, putting several holes in.
All right.
And then we would get newspaper and stuff newspaper in, and then set light to it, and then flames would come out, and it would look like a gas ring. And that was quite sort of satisfying for some reason.
It didn't
Don't know
serve
what.
any purpose.
No purpose whatsoever.
pure effect.
There you go. That was how we entertained ourselves in those days.
Well, I suppose it was comparatively cheap compared to something today, which would be completely money dependent, on upgrade for a computer game or some software or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, most of my toys in those days were reliant on a one-off payment.
Yeah.
There wasn't the continual need to upgrade something. Once you got the thing, it gave you hours of pleasure.
Yeah. When I was about, I don't know, 6 or 7, I had a little tricycle, and it was like a metallic blue colour. It was a tricycle, but on the back it had a little box with a lid on it, so you could put things in there. And I can still remember how it felt to put my hand on the handle and turn the handle and lift the lid up. And then you could put things in there, maybe a Pez or a Jubbly or something.
Oh, yeah, Jubbly.
And then you close the lid and turn the handle, get on your bike and ride off. But I can still feel that handle between my fingers, and I can remember what it felt like to actually turn it and the resistance you had when you turned it.
Oh, yeah.
It's sort of imprinted.
I can remember when I was very young, I had a little pedal car, that I got into.
Oh, yeah.
Registration number LBL 4242.
Very good.
And I can remember the feel of my feet on the pedals now. And as you got in, you used to scrape your knees on the cold metal, the feel of grazed knees.
Yeah. Did you have those pedals that were just like stirrups?
Yeah, that's stirrups,
and
that's
you
right.
go like...
Yeah.
Yeah, I had one of those. It was an American-style Jeep. It was like khaki coloured, but there was a little bit of rust on it. And then one day, my dad completely painted my American Jeep in yellow.
Oh, it was hand-painted. So you got the brush strokes as well.
Yeah.
That's something that you don't get now. I mean, there weren't such things as aerosol paints, were there, in those days?
Oh, gosh, no.
It was just tins, wasn't it, and a brush, basically.
Yeah.
That's another thing that's slipped away, isn't it? In the past, we had like traditions on TV at different times of the year, didn't we?
Well, I mean...
The thing about the bank holiday always being when you would see a Brian Rix farce.
Yeah, that's right.
It's so true, isn't it?
It was often selections from the show, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. I don't know if it was restricted to particular bank holidays or whether it was all bank holidays.
It just seemed like all bank holidays.
But the other thing which actually made me laugh out loud was as the credits were rolling, the guy says, "And Billy Dainty is appearing in Mother Goose at the Adelphi Theatre, London."
It was kind of half interesting and half kind of silly and boring.
I think the word you're looking for there is daft.
Yeah, I think my parents thought it was a bit daft, farce and all that.
And then the Christmas lectures from the Science Institute.
Oh, yeah, they were a real tradition, weren't they? And they didn't treat the kids like they were idiots as well. They assumed some level of intelligence, didn't they?
That's right.
Eric Laithwaite stuck in my mind because he was the first presenter on those that I saw. I've got a memory of watching them somewhere around Christmas 1966. You were in the peak of winter, very dark, and the afternoons are like drawing in around 3:30,
Yeah.
The depths of December,
Last night, I was watching the TV channel that has videos of 1960s pop groups.
Oh, right.
Last night, I was watching The Monkees.
Yeah.
Pleasant Valley
Right.
Sunday.
Pleasant Valley Sunday. Oh, yeah.
And there's a line in it where Mickey Dolenz says, "The smell of charcoal everywhere."
Yeah.
If I heard that in 1966, you'd be thinking, well, what does that mean? Is that somebody's house is on fire? Or
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
But the idea of having a barbecue hadn't even come to this country.
It wasn't a tradition at all here, was it? I mean, Americans did barbecues, didn't they?
Yeah,
And Australians.
because they had the weather, didn't they?
Yeah.
I mean, that didn't come to us for another 30 years, probably.
Yeah, that's right. I think I remember it about the 1980s or something. When you went into a petrol station, you start to see charcoal briquettes,
Yeah,
of all places to sell them.
yeah.
Anything like that in the past would have been sold in a hardware shop, wouldn't it?
Yes, along with
know.
the paraffin.
Yeah, along with the paraffin, that's right. And those dustbins with the funnel coming out the top so you can burn your rubbish in them.
Burn your leaves.
That wasn't the province of a petrol station, was it, before?
Incredible.
I just thought of another TV tradition, though. Hogmanay.
Andy Stewart, yeah.
When I was getting a little bit older,
My parents would go to bed about 11 or something, and I would watch the Hogmanay programme that was on at midnight.
Yeah.
I'm sure to Scottish people that Hogmanay was obviously quite significant and important. But to everybody else, it seemed like a bit of a head scratcher.
It's a bit like watching Welsh TV.
Well, it was a TV tradition that went on for years, wasn't it? Even outside of Scotland.
Yeah.
But, looking at it now, I see it as being part of a bigger tradition on television at that time, It was like the very end of variety, really, wasn't it?
That was it, really.
Hmm.
You've got Sunday night at the London Palladium with the Tiller Girls. They'd always be on.
Yeah, that was real variety, wasn't it? Jack Parnell and
Jack
his
Parnell
orchestra, yeah.
with his conducting stick. And then you'd have some Eastern European acrobatic act.
The amazing
festival.
Gregoria and Delia, whoever she was.
And she'd have a fag in her mouth, and the bloke would have a horsewhip.
Oh, yeah, and he'd knock it out of her mouth, yeah. Yeah, they wouldn't do that now, would they? That would be...
You wouldn't be allowed to do that.
No.
But yes, there was this bloke came on.
Not the Muscle Man.
Not the Muscle Man.
With Will's Cha-Cha-Cha.
He was a singer, and
Yeah.
quite a serious kind of opera singer.
Yeah.
And he'd come on in his tuxedo, and he started singing this opera. And as he was singing, you sort of suddenly noticed that his arms were getting slightly longer.
Okay.
And my brother and I just thought this was hysterically funny.
That was quite a niche act, wasn't it?
And then usually the top of the bill would be whoever was the latest top pop band in the charts.
Yeah.
It might be the Fortunes.
That's right. But it would always highlight the fact that all this other stuff was such old hat.
And you got that sense that when the latest pop group came on,
Yeah.
the old-timer acts were a bit cynical.
Yeah, this isn't going to last.
Yeah.
It was notable, wasn't it? Because you had a band which was like up to the minute, and they'd be surrounded by all these people like Tommy Trinder, with his hat on at a jaunty angle like some favourite cheeky uncle,
Yeah. And then you get Dickie Henderson. Yeah.
Yeah, he just wanted to be American, didn't he, Dickie
Yeah,
Henderson?
he had that transatlantic.
Yeah.
Well, it's a bit like Brucey. He always wanted to be Sammy Davis Jr., didn't he?
Yeah, that's right. You can't imagine Sammy Davis Jr. saying, "Oh, I wish I could be like Bruce Forsyth."
Well, my dad always used to say that on Sunday night at the London Palladium, if you saw an American act,
Yeah.
you knew that their career was on the wane. So you'd get somebody like Danny Kaye would appear,
Yeah.
who was like a massive star. If they have to come to England to try and get a bit of recognition, that's it, they're finished.
They were always sort of treated like royalty, weren't they, when they came over here? They always topped the bill, didn't they?
Yeah, you get someone like Bob Hope. That'd be quite a big deal, actually.
It would, wouldn't it? Yeah. But there was a lot of the others, which you might call like third-rate American acts, that come over here, and people would fawn over them. You think, oh, what's great about them?
Yeah. So, yeah, it was really the death throes of variety, wasn't it, really?
It was, wasn't it? That's something that's changed, actually. Traditions and attitudes between girls and boys in early dating.
Yeah. Wow.
It seemed a lot more innocent back then, although it was quite traumatic when things went wrong.
You've just made me think of Violet Hearts.
Have I?
Love Hearts, you mean?
Love Hearts.
Yeah.
And I used to sort of take a love heart out,
Yeah.
and I used to think, right, the next love heart I take out, that's what my girlfriend's going to tell me. And
Yeah.
you'd read it, and it'd say, "You're sweet," or something like that. And I used to think, can't wait to hear those words.
But if you were younger, if you were, say, below 10 or something, that would be the worst thing in the world. You wouldn't want something which was a bit sissy,
But
the
yeah.
message on it,
Yeah.
You'd want it to be something which your friends wouldn't take the mickey out of you for,
Now, there's a little phrase that
Yeah.
used to come up.
What's that?
If you were at primary school or junior school and you quite liked a girl in the class,
Yeah.
and one of your friends would go, "You love her."
Yeah. That's right, yeah. That was the worst shame, wasn't it? Because it wasn't manly, was it?
It wasn't manly, no. And imagine my horror when a girl in my class in the infants, actually, who was, shall we say, a robust girl,
Yeah.
and she came up to me one day and she said, Russell, she said, "One day we're going to get married." I thought, oh no.
All right. What did you say? What, to each other? or-
And I've still got a copy of my French Nuffield exercise book with her name on it.
Do you know what invited that comment from her?
She seemed to like me for some reason. I don't think I'd done anything. I tried my best to avoid her, really.
She'd obviously made her mind up about it.
Yeah.
So you're still waiting, really, for it to happen then?
I keep checking my aunt's phone.
And that was just infant school.
Yeah.
This is another one of my expressions that is no longer used. If you hook up with somebody and you live with them before you're married, that was living in sin.
Living in
wasn't it?
sin, yeah, that's right.
I mean, nowadays it's perfectly normal for people to get together and then get married.
It was quite shocking then, wasn't it, if people lived together before they got married? And it was talked about in whispered tones.
Same thing with divorce.
Yeah, all those sort of entrenched attitudes. They were sort of unspoken, but they always had little sayings to cover them, didn't they?
Expressions. What did my mum used to say to you?
My parents had little proverbs and things like that. You know, if you didn't understand why something was a certain way as a kid, they would sort of reel off one of these little sayings, you know.
Which you didn't really understand.
No. It explained it to them, but, you know, you with your sort of knowledge of the world as limited as it was, made no sense at all.
Yeah.
One example, I'd wander into the kitchen where my mum was working. She'd say, "Oh, what do you want?" And I'd say, "Oh, I don't want nothing." "Oh, well, you must want something then."
Yes.
There was always a little answer, you know, a little witty thing.
Yeah, these are sort of mysteries that, you know, you have as a child.
Mysteries of childhood.
The things that your parents do, they just don't understand
That's right,
why they do them. My Uncle Charlie was a sales rep for Gillette blades.
Oh, was he? Yeah.
And he had a van with a huge pretend razor blade on the roof.
Oh, I remember those.
Angle.
There was a lot of vans around like that, wasn't there?
Mm.
You know, used to be promotions for things. And I suppose it was another way, pre-internet, of advertising businesses.
Yeah.
Was it a diagonal on the top of the roof?
Yes.
That's how they used to be, didn't they?
Exactly.
Things, wasn't
Yeah.
it? Another thing about advertising related to that was those big advertising hoardings you used to see everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Huge sort of 20 feet things. You used to get like a row of them, didn't you? And they used to be shored up from behind, didn't they? You used to have struts to keep them in place. But you often used to see them next to where there was, I suppose they were bomb sites, where there was a bit of derelict land, where there was a house missing.
Yeah, that's true. Or if a shop had closed down, you'd see Billy Smart's Circus posters all over it.
That's right. I mean, I suppose there's not many unused or derelict buildings anymore. Everything has to be monetised, doesn't it?
Well, that's right.
And you often used to get derelict cinemas that stood there for ages, you know, when they closed down.
And I remember outside the cinema, there was like a glass cabinet, and they would have photographs from the next coming attraction.
That's right.
Next week.
Little illuminated boxes, weren't they?
Yeah.
They had a light behind the photo.
And another thing related to cinemas, I remember standing outside the Embassy Cinema in Ruislip High Street with my friend John. If there was a film on, X-rated, and there might be a U certificate supporting film, you'd hang around outside to see if an adult would take you in.
A responsible adult.
A responsible adult will let us in to see the U certificate film, and then we just stay there and we can see the other film as well.
Sounds a bit dodgy to do that.
It does sound very dodgy.
Yeah. Did it work?
I think it did, although I felt very uncomfortable about it. I think it might have been Till Death Us Do Part film.
Oh, yeah.
And the supporting film was The London Nobody Knows, which is a bit of a classic. And that was a U certificate.
I don't think I actually did it. I know people that did it.
Yeah.
But if I had have done it, it's the sort of thing that I wouldn't have told my parents that I'd done.
Absolutely.
You know. Thing in those days, what's really changed though, I mean, if you missed the start of a film, you could sit and watch it round again, couldn't you?
Hence the expression, this is where we came in.
Yeah. There was no attempt to turf you out or anything. I can remember sitting in there and watching a film 2 full times. It was quite laid back in cinemas in those days, wasn't it? Whereas in other things, you know, it was quite rigid and specific. Like, for instance, attention to detail and how people looked and keeping up standards. You know, people paid close attention to how they looked, and there would be a certain look for different occasions.
Yes. So my dad, you'd never see him wearing a pair of jeans, for example.
No.
Absolutely not.
Little things in the look of people in those days, like tie pins.
Yes, tie pins. When you were at school, you had your school tie.
Yeah.
Did you have one of those things for keeping the tie in shape? It's just like a aluminium rod, sort of bent almost in half.
Oh, yeah.
And you'd slide it in, and it would push outwards and keep the tie straight. And also, when you bought a shirt, there was all these pins in them, wasn't there?
That's right, yeah. And on special occasions, my dad would put his suit on, and he'd have the handkerchief sticking out of the top pocket in a triangle.
And you used to get a little fake one of those, like a cardboard.
That's right. Although he would never have done that.
No.
You know, it was a real cloth handkerchief that had been ironed and then folded into exactly, you know, so it was just so.
My dad didn't do this, but my granddad would always have a waistcoat, as they would call it.
Waistcoat, yeah.
With a watch and a chain in a pocket. Sounds like a village in Oxfordshire, doesn't it?
Waistcoat, yeah.
Yeah. We moved to Westcott. It's nice there. Yeah.
Yeah. There were certain ways of saying things in those days, weren't there? I mean, Westcott. People don't say Westcott, do they? And my dad used to say certificate as well. I can't remember when I heard the last person say something like that.
Julie's mum used to
Yeah.
say funeral.
Funeral.
Oh, we've got to go to a funeral on Friday.
Oh, right, that's an
you
unusual one.
And then the other one was if somebody had a medical issue.
You didn't have medical issues in those days, did you?
No,
You were under the doctor.
under the doctor. And your mum was talking to one of her friends. She's got a little bit of trouble with her water.
Oh, yeah.
When it gets to the personal bits,
Yeah.
they would just mouth the words.
I
not
suddenly
actually
turned
say
into
them.
Les Dawson. I remember specifically, I can remember my mum and my nan having those conversations.
Yeah,
And they would get to that bit and they would either mouth it or whisper it really low,
yeah.
or a level that they thought I couldn't hear it, but actually I could. Not that it made any sense to me at that age.
I could just remember being bored to tears with my mum. Yeah, one of her friends from down the road would come round and they'd knock on the back door. Oh, come in here.
That's something else that's gone out of fashion, knocking on the back door.
Knocking on the back door.
Yeah.
Coming in for a chat.
You don't get neighbours or relatives coming around who aren't actually aunt and uncle, but you call them that. That you don't have that anymore, do you?
That's right. And also people knowing everybody else's business down the road. I've still got it on home movie footage. The house opposite, there was obviously a wedding going on, a wedding reception. And at some point, the couple came out and got in the car. And my dad filmed it. We didn't know them at all. But he hid behind the curtain and just had a tiny bit of window showing and stuck his cine camera in. Why? No idea.
So it was just like a big event locally. Then.
Well, I think in those days, in the 60s, if there was a wedding going on, it was a
Yeah.
bit like a sort of like a rock festival, or it was like the royalty coming to town. And if somebody was getting married in our local church, St Giles Church in Ickenham, even if you didn't know who the couple were, there'd be crowds of people all gathering around to look.
Yes.
You know,
So did he ever offer them a copy of that film?
doubt it very, very much. Blow their mind, wouldn't it?
It
If
would,
you suddenly
wouldn't it?
turn up 60 years later.
Yeah. Even photos of things like that, though, were quite a big deal in those days, weren't they? You know, there's the whole rigmarole of getting everything developed and all that.
Well, when I was working at Boots the Chemist, the upstairs photo developing department was still in full swing.
Still going.
Now it's completely irrelevant now, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there used to be specific departments in places like Boots, didn't there? And they would be like a hive of activity.
Yeah,
Yeah, and of course, you could always get films developed in chemists in those days.
that's right.
I mean, what's that
That's
got to do
right.
with medicine? I don't know.
No. And another little ritual in stores was we got a pharmacy or on a raised platform, weren't
We didn't have pharmacies. We had chemist shops in those days, didn't we?
we? Yeah.
And you didn't have chemists in the supermarket, did you?
No,
like
no,
you do
it'd be
now.
a separate. And if you went into the chemist shop, you always felt as if you sort of had to be on your best behaviour as well.
Yeah,
It's like, oh, I'm going to see the doctor. I better be behaving properly here. I can't be mucking about.
yeah. They had a certain area of things that they sold. It was medicine, but there were a few other things which were associated with good health, like Lucozade, Slimming biscuits.
Or Hacks cough sweets.
Yeah,
And Slim Sear bread.
that's right. Slim Sear bread and PLJ lemon juice. Do you remember that?
That was horrible.
Yeah.
Most of the things that are good for you were horrible, weren't they?
But why, for instance, crisp breads in a chemist shop?
Yeah,
I mean, it's not medicine.
that's true.
In chemists, you would get a very slight overlap with sweet shops in that you would get barley sugars, probably, things like that.
Which is what they encourage you to have on an aeroplane. Suck barley sugar.
What's that supposed to do?
The act of sucking helps to keep your ears clear so that you don't get your ears popping.
Oh, well, at least it doesn't have to be barley sugars. It could be another boiled sweet then.
Yeah.
How we dressed has really changed, hasn't it? I mean, wearing certain clothes for certain situations.
Yeah, very much, yeah.
Going back, you would definitely dress smartly on a Sunday. These days, I mean, if you were going to visit somebody, you wouldn't dress up for it, would you? I don't think so.
No, everything's been made informal, hasn't it? There's an informality about everything these days.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's really thought to be that way or whether we're fed the idea that it's better.
Well, that's right. I mean, I just wear jeans and a T-shirt the whole weekend.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Well, another clothing tradition which seems to have changed is if you're going to a funeral.
Yeah.
Don't you mean a funeral?
Quite often now, people are just dressing quite casually,
Yeah.
not wearing black necessarily. I went to a family funeral a few years ago,
Yeah.
and it was right in the middle of summer.
Yeah.
I had a dark suit, black tie, but everyone else was wearing summer colours and summer clothes. So that seems to be another tradition which is changing.
Yeah, I suppose the idea that people can choose exactly what they want to have music-wise now is a different thing, isn't it?
Now, that's a good one. I don't know which way you're supposed to go with that one.
Well, is it the choice and taste of the person that's died, or is it just your taste you're reflecting?
Yeah.
You know, you were talking about people wearing hats earlier on.
Yes.
When we were growing up, you know, if it was blokes, it would have been a trilby hat. And my mum used to wear a headscarf.
Yeah.
That was her regular kind of uniform, if you like. That's what she wore all the time, unless it was really hot, you know.
And in the city of London, it's all bowler hats.
That's
If
right.
you went up north where my grandparents lived in Yorkshire, it'd all be flat caps
Yeah,
up there.
yeah,
If you went to a really posh wedding, it'd be top hats, wouldn't it?
yeah. Like my dad used to wear a cap when he went to work, you know, in the day.
Yeah.
And some people, like if they had a car, they'd have motoring caps, wouldn't they? Do you remember?
Yeah, they would.
But they were just subtly different, weren't they, motoring caps? And they'd have a pair of motoring gloves as well to go with it.
With a string back on them.
Yeah. But if you look now at people in the street, the only sort of hats you'll be likely to see would be baseball caps.
Yeah.
It's a major change of culture. It's also Americanisation,
Unfortunately, yeah.
and it's that informality thing of we can wear what we like now.
Yes.
Grown men and retired people are wearing shorts at any time of the year. That's another thing.
Yeah.
But, you know, for better or worse, our parents, they did have a set of standards that they observed right through their adult life, didn't they?
Absolutely. I never saw my dad with a 5 o'clock shadow. Always like a question of honour.
Look clean and respectable.
Yes.
Well, that's a good example. Standards mustn't slip, you know.
Yeah. My dad used to have an electric shaver, which kind of handheld with a lead coming over, and it had like 3 rotating heads on it.
Was it like a Philly shave or one of those?
Yeah. Probably even before that.
I always shave. Don't do it every day, but my dad did. But he always used to use proper razors.
Yeah.
It's kind of odd, really, because
You know, I've always dressed in T-shirt and jeans right from the time when I've been old enough to make up my own mind about what I wanted to wear, you know.
Yeah. That would be a staple thing.
I mean, because I grew up in the 60s, there was a reaction against that wartime tradition of formality.
Yeah, very much.
When I was doing it at the time,
you know, it was almost like I was making a statement by dressing informally.
Yes.
But, you know, now everybody dresses informally. It's almost like there are no standards because there's nothing to judge that informality in comparison to.
That's very true. That one has slipped under the radar, hasn't it?
yeah. But when I look back, I'm almost nostalgic that people had standards.
Hmm.
You know, although some of it was probably misguided and to do with climbing the social ladder, and
Yeah.
they still had something which was a target to aim for. I was just thinking when I was very young, what method we had of heating water. I think we just had a small immersion heater. But I think for smaller amounts, we used to just boil a kettle.
I think we did.
Mm.
I can remember my mum pouring a kettle of water, and also my brother would probably have a bath, and then I would get into the same water afterwards.
Yeah, that's right.
You wouldn't
yeah.
empty it.
I think because my dad had 3 sisters, and I think I can remember him saying the same thing. They used to sort of share a bath.
Yeah.
And that seems a bit...
It's disgusting.
It does now. Yeah, it was pure economy in those days, wasn't it?
Well, that's right. Yeah.
And it couldn't have been that much water because they wouldn't have had a heater or anything. I wonder how and why it became a tradition to have bath time on Sunday evenings.
Well,
Yeah.
You can't have a bath any other night.
No.
perhaps it goes back to a time when, you know, it was going to be quite expensive to have a bath every day for the heating up all that water.
Yeah.
So I suppose you're getting yourself ready for the new week about to start, I suppose.
I don't think we had them more than once a week. I mean, we used to have a wash in the week, but it was a much smaller affair.
Very much.
And we didn't take showers in those days, did we? Because we didn't have showers.
The other ritual was if you had a cold,
Mm.
putting your head over a bowl of hot water with a towel over you.
Oh, yeah. If my mum or my dad had a bad cold or something, they'd get a bowl of hot water, probably with Friar's balsam or something in it.
Yeah.
And they would put the towel over their head and breathe in the vapour, you know.
That looks like a really uncomfortable experience.
It does. I mean, it never appealed to me at all when they used to suggest it. You know, no thanks. People have hot water on tap now in a way that they didn't used to.
Yeah. I
You
mean,
know.
we take so much for granted now.
I think the biggest need for like hot water in those days was like my mum and my nan having endless cups of tea.
Yeah. Which would be done properly in a teapot.
That's right, yeah.
When tea bags came along, I think my dad thought tea bags were a bit like something that hippies would do. You know,
Tea bags. I don't think my parents ever used tea bags, actually. It was always tea leaves, you know.
It was more than just a drink. Tea was
Yeah.
really like a ritual, wasn't it? It was a bit like the sacraments. It was a bit like sort of taking bread and
Yes.
wine.
Yeah. Very British. That's something else that's changed, isn't it, in life? It's like everything's collectible now, isn't it? Everything's got a
Yeah.
potential price on its head.
Yeah.
People
yeah.
buy things with the view to kind of like investment.
I remember my brother coming home one day because he was 5 years older than me, and he came home with this record by The Who, an album called My Generation.
Yeah,
Now, if he'd have kept that and put it aside and kept it pristine,
yeah,
but of course he didn't do that.
yeah.
He got a black marker pen out and drew pictures on the cover
Did he?
and highlighted things.
Defaced it, basically.
He defaced it. But these things go in fashions, don't they?
Yeah.
I'd like to know how much I'd get for my Mickey Mouse Pez dispenser, which I bought in 1967.
Yeah.
It's still
Yeah.
got some Pez in it.
I've still got some unopened Pez sweets. They're actually on the card.
Still on the card.
used to-
That's got to be very, very popular. It's all like fashions, and then
Yeah.
2 years' time, it won't be.
Yeah, I know. That's right. Yeah.
The other thing that has changed is the actual rate of change.
It's like a snowball rolling down a hill, isn't it? It gathers pace.
Yeah. I think also, though, when you're that young, when you're, let's say, 0 to 10 years old, 2 or 3 years is quite a big chunk of your life, isn't
Yeah.
it? Percentage-wise.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you're older, 2 or 3 years is only a tiny fraction. Nevertheless, the rate of change has gone stratospheric, hasn't
It
it?
has, hasn't it? Yeah.
Nothing stays the same for more than a few months now.
But beneath the surface of it, things aren't that different. Like, for instance, if you look at music now, it's not changed a lot in 20 years.
No. Now, interestingly, you could easily imagine going to see a band playing music from, let's say, 40 or even 50 years ago.
Yeah.
But when we were young, in
Yeah.
the 60s, the idea of listening to music from 40 years before then was unthinkable, really.
Yeah,
Because that would have
absolutely, yeah.
taken you back to the 1920s.
Yeah, I know. Although the structure of life behind us, while we were growing up, it seemed not to change.
Mm.
It seemed like everything had been like that forever.
Mm.
You know,
Formality and manners, class deference.
well-spoken people in charge of everything, old people running shops, you know, whereas music in front of that was changing all the time.
Yeah.
If you look at 63, the coming of the Beatles, and then you look at it just 4 years later, you've got Flower Power, Psychedelia,
Yeah,
etc.
yeah.
That all happened in 4 years.
Yeah.
Whereas now, if you look at music 20 years ago, it's roughly the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's got elements of dance music, there's a bit of hip hop in there and some electronica. You know, you've got samples and you've got a lot of production going on, basically. Whereas in the 60s, music changed almost on a yearly basis,
It did, didn't it?
But the other thing is, it's becoming a virtual world in a lot of ways, isn't it?
It is.
I was talking to this teenager and I was trying to explain, we didn't always have the internet and they couldn't quite understand what I was talking about. So, how did you order things? How did you look up things? Well, you could buy a map or you go into a bookshop or you go to the grocer's or you'd write a letter to somebody.
50 years ago, everything was labour intensive, wasn't it? Everything that existed had to be actually made physically. It didn't just exist on a computer screen.
Yeah. And I don't know if you remember this, but in the early days of Top of the Pops,
Yeah.
they used to do a rundown of the songs in the chart. And as they went through the songs, a guy would hold up a picture, a hand-drawn picture representing that song. And then there's one particular picture, and it was Downtown by Petula Clark. And it was just a line that went down. And at the top of the picture, there was a picture of a car. And at the bottom, there's a picture of a town. And do you remember that slide of Johnny Stewart?
Johnny Stewart, yeah.
And he was like sitting on a chair
Yeah.
with his legs hanging out. And
Yeah.
he just looked so cool.
Yeah, he was just sort of like resting on the stool, wasn't he?
Yeah,
Something.
he's about to leap off and do
Yeah,
something exciting.
something dynamic, yeah. Well, as a TV producer, he had to be, didn't he? But case in point, all those captions had to be handmade.
Yeah,
That's what's changed.
that's right. And I mean, a few months ago, I lost my phone, and there were hundreds of photos on there that I'd taken,
Yeah.
and it's all gone.
Yeah, I think social history is going to change because I think since about the beginning of the early days of the internet, 1990s, rather than been sending letters, they've been sending emails.
Yeah,
And people have been taking pictures on their phones rather than actually taking
Yeah,
them with
like-
a proper camera with film.
there is a little bit of a sort of a backlash on that because The other week we saw our little grandson and Julie took photos of him, but she took her phone down to Tesco's
Yeah.
and actually got them printed out as physical
Oh,
photos
right, okay, yeah.
and put it in
Yeah.
frames. So at least.
Yeah. Quite rare though, isn't it, now?
And the other thing was, of course, you might buy a film with 24 exposures or 36.
Yeah.
And so you were very careful about what it was you actually photographed.
Yeah.
Hopefully that one will come out. Also, you can tell quite a lot about someone if you look at the photos on their phone. Not that you'd be allowed to, but if you did,
Yeah.
you can tell quite a lot about a person's personality.
Yeah, because a lot of people, they do all their socialising on Facebook or Twitter or something like that. If that isn't being archived, what happens to it in the end? It's all going to disappear into the ether, isn't it? So that whole record of their lives, which is entirely conducted on there, is going to be gone, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think there's going to be more physical artifacts from, say, the 20th century than there is of the 21st century, maybe.
Oh, yeah.
Off the top of your head, some of the sights, sounds and smells of the past that you no longer see.
Ah.
What comes to mind?
Mannequins. You don't see them anymore, do you?
What, in shop windows, you mean? No, I haven't seen any for ages. Used to find them quite surreal as a kid.
And the smell of creosote fences.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I used to love that smell as a kid. Do people use creosote anymore?
I don't know. And of course, a lot of people's front gardens now tend to be bricked over, don't they, or concreted over?
Yeah. This is a particularly unpleasant smell and sight, actually. Cigarette smoke and full-up ashtrays in pubs and restaurants.
Oh, yeah.
And just about anywhere, actually. That was a real big change, wasn't it? I never thought I'd see it, but it happened.
Oh, yeah. Homeless people. Vagabonds.
Oh, yeah, what? Old school tramps, you mean, as we used to refer to them, yeah.
Yeah.
You used to see them about, didn't you, with bundles or pushing a pram or something, a bit like Arthur Haynes' sort of caricature.
Yeah.
Usually older men, weren't they? And you just encounter them passing through your town at some point. You don't see those people anymore. I wonder where they've gone.
That's the other thing. New Year's Eve, it's not such a big deal now as it used to be. I mean, I remember in the 60s, New Year's Eve was really just as big a deal as Christmas Day, really. You know, we'd have people from up the street that we'd never see any other time of the year would come up. My parents would let them in and they might offer them a Dubonnet or or a small glass of dry sherry, you know.
Yeah, Wincarnis.
Wincarnis, yeah. Cherry B.
Yeah, Christmas Eve was the thing, you know. If we were going out, you know, when I was at college, I mean, Christmas Eve was the night to go out. It'd be buzzing.
Yeah.
And the other one which has slipped from popularity quite dramatically in recent years, Guy Fawkes Night. That is a tradition which has really gone out, hasn't it?
Really is, yeah. The thing that we didn't celebrate in those days was Halloween. And nowadays, it's gone the other way now. It's all Halloween and...
You can hear a few fireworks on Bonfire Night, but there's not really much of it at all. People didn't know what trick-or-treat was when I was growing up.
I guess on your nerves.
Well, it's kind of usurped the Bonfire Night thing, which is more relevant because it's about an event in history here.
Exactly right. And I think there should be a revival of Guy Fawkes Night.
Definitely.
Wednesday closing.
Oh, yes.
Half-day closing.
That's another one that's faded out, isn't it?
When we lived in the grocer's shop, we certainly closed Wednesday afternoon.
Virtually all what you might call general shops closed, didn't they?
I think the tradition there was Wednesday used to be market day.
I suppose it was so that the market had a free run and it didn't have to compete with the shops.
I suppose so, yeah. I mean, there was no street market in our village, so it was just one of those things, just a tradition.
Yeah, where I was, you could walk in different directions and the early closing day would be either Wednesday or Thursday. So that was quite handy.
A lot of things, a lot of traditions you didn't even question when you were young. It was just the way things were.
That's right. So if you wanted to buy something, you know, you knew that you had to buy it before 12:30 or 1 o'clock on Wednesday or Thursday.
Well, I mean, we moved out of the shop in 1972.
Yeah.
It was certainly still very much the tradition then. But I can't think of any shops that close now.
It's quite rare.
We had one of those little signs that looked like a sort of a number plate hanging on a chain, and it just had closed on one side and open on the other. So you just turn it around. If somebody was trying to get into the shop on a Wednesday afternoon, my dad would point to the sign.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of things you kind of are born into, and they were always there. You don't even think about why you do them. You just
No.
do them, you know.
You know, our generation, we've kind of rebelled against a lot of those conventions, haven't we?
We've just sort of left it all behind, haven't we?
Yeah. Now that they're actually gone, I kind of half miss some of them, you know?
Yes, I do.
In a way, like the routine of daily life now, every day is almost very similar to another, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I suppose it's the difference I like.
Yeah, the week had a shape to it,
Yeah.
didn't it?
We sort of made life very generic, and it's almost a case of be careful what you wish for.
It's funny, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's things that you miss.
Mm.
My mum would occasionally, if I was taking sandwiches to school, occasionally she would wrap them in greaseproof paper.
Greaseproof paper, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and I always thought they tasted much better when they were wrapped in greaseproof paper.
Yeah.
Somehow.
Well, it's like chips out of newspaper. It seems to taste better that way, don't we?
Yes.
I think we need to go back to the greaseproof paper world, don't we?
Yeah.
That's something else that's gone now, actually. You don't have pea supers anymore, do you? You used to get them really thick, didn't you? And then it stopped.
Well, I mean, exit signs. They're on the way out, aren't they?
They are indeed.
And there we must leave them. Time to go home now. Why not pop in again soon to revisit some more old memories? At the Time Warp Tavern. Last orders, please.